in general, that gives you it's a big shoulder shrug from me, okay?
You're not a schedule person.
I'm not a schedule guy. I don't know why we need a 2-hour schedule reveal. I do enjoy some of the schedule videos that the schools put out, or how NFL teams make it this huge social media event with some really creative things. Shout out to Duke. Duke, a little poking fun at Clemson, where they had one of their players, going out into the tunnel, slapping basically a cinder block instead of Howard's Rock, and is running out onto the field, and they're going to play Clemson first. Ha, ha, ha. Of course, Clemson fans didn't know how to process this. Oh, yeah, it's great bulletin board material. I don't know. Have a sense of fun, guys. Jeez. It wasn't like they were taking shots. They were just, hey, cool. Be playing at Clemson. Got it. Anyway. The only reason why I was interested in the schedule reveal last night was because North Carolina head coach Mack Brown, during some press availability earlier, said, the schedule is unfair. You'll see why when they unveil the schedule. I'm thinking, what the hell did they do to Mack Brown in Carolina? Is it, did somebody have a sick sense of humor and give them nothing but Atlantic teams just to see what it would be like to be NC State? That can't be it, right? So I look at the schedule. I'm like, okay, cool. They open up the year against South Carolina and Charlotte. We knew that. Cool, got it. They've done this before, not that big of a deal. Then they host App State. All right, that's the back end of that home and home. They went up the mountain last year. Got it. App comes here. They're at home. And then they have a home game against Minnesota. Okay. Then they go to Pitt. Then they have an open date. And they're back home against Syracuse, home against Miami, and home against Virginia. They play once, a true road game once in 2 months, essentially. Because then they go back on the road Saturday, October 28th at Georgia Tech. Again, I'm looking at this going, what's the problem? All right, then they got Campbell at home. All right, it's freaking November. What's the issue? Aha! Now I know why Mac looked at the schedule and went, this is unfair. Because in the span of 3 weeks, Carolina's got a home game against Duke, on the road at Clemson, and then they close out the year on the road at Carter Finley Stadium. So that's 2 rivalry games as the bread to your at Death Valley sandwich. And I guess that's why Mack Brown's upset. Is that it? Because he got back-to-back road games to close out the year against the toughest team in the ACC versus the rival that has been getting over on you in some pretty dramatic ways the last couple of years? This is it. This is what's unfair.
To be clear, Carolina has not had to play Clemson every year.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
Clemson's 60-5 in the league since 2015. So when Max said yesterday, you'll see what I'm talking about tonight, it won't take you long to figure it out. My first guess was, I bet you they play Clemson and NC State in consecutive weeks. Oh, would you look at that? The team that hasn't regularly had to play Clemson is already complaining about where they play Clemson on their schedule. Already. That's like record time, Joe. They haven't even they divisions are still the 40 is still fresh on the grave of the Coastal Division.
That 48 fresh.
And Pat Narduzzi.
It's set at room temperature for the whole day.
Pat Narduzzi's over there going, so what? Just beat Clemson. Now you sound like a State fan. 60-5 in the league. Yeah, you think maybe it's a little bit of a disadvantage to play the best teams in the league every year?
But it can't just be that they're
weird.
It can't be.
My guess. Here is my
Clemson.
Here is my guess. You see the Campbell game on there, and Carolina has now regularly tried to play their 1AA opponent before they play State.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You are allowed one request to the league office.
Mm-hmm.
For NC State, their request is they do not want to host a football game during the State Fair. Okay? So every year you get one request. Fine. My guess is Carolina's request was we prefer to have our final non-conference game to be before the finale against NC State. That would just be my pure speculative guess. And when you don't get that request, it is difficult for you. I could see Mack Brown yesterday being like, I don't think it's in his own head, knowing what it was and no one else knowing what it was, probably being like, hey, there's 14 and 5/8 teams, and we all get one request that's basically granted 99% of the time. Now, to head something off at the pass here, you can't request an open date before you play Georgia Tech and Paul Johnson. That wasn't a real thing, okay? You can't request an open date after you play Clemson. Basically, it has to be, for a long time for Carolina, it was their preference was they don't want to play on Thursday nights. And they when Duke was their home game, they wanted that game to be their finale. So for a long time, that was their request, and it was met. So I could see frustration from take the names of the schools, take the names of the coaches out of it.
Yeah.
I could see a frustration, I'm being sincere right now.
Makes total sense.
That, hey, man, the protocol basically is when you make your request, it's honored. So I could see him yesterday. Now, circumstantially, that's not going to stop me from kind of, poking a little bit of fun on the Twitters, because State, for all these years, okay, I know where you're going, so let's just get the numbers. Dave Doran is 6-4 against Carolina, right?
That's the most important number, by the way.
He's 6-4 against Carolina.
You can stop right there.
He's 7-8 against the rest of the Coastal Division.
Yeah.
Right? Or you can look at it this way. He started 1 of 5 against the Coastal. He's now won 12 of the last 19 against the Coastal. So there's that. You flip that around. He's 1-8 against Clemson. Not good, obviously. 24-24 against the rest of the Atlantic, which would be your argument. It's not necessarily Clemson that's been in State's way. It's been Boston College. It's been Wake Forest. So, but to me, there's no way around that Clemson is 60-5 in the league over the last 8 seasons.
There's two separate conversations.
But that is a team, and I'll say this too, to Mack's point, if this was his thought process, it's hard to reload the musket, particularly if you pour it out for Duke, which they had to this year. Then all of a sudden you go down there and you probably want to get the brakes beat off because you want to be totally focused for State.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we go back and now look at teams after they play the Clemson, which is a loss, they have a hard time recovering, a real hard time recovering, which is what we saw with State, obviously, in 2016 when they had to turn around and play Lamar Jackson, and they just got completely and totally embarrassed.
There's two separate conversations about, and the one thing that I wanted to get away from in the back and forth between divisions, people in the Atlantic claiming it was difficult. No, it's just, it's Clemson's time, man.
Clemson was difficult, but at the beginning of it, it was Florida State, Clemson, and then you had the Lamar Jackson.
But there's always going to be one team. That's the point. There's always going to be one team that's going to be really
the beginning of it, it probably was Virginia Tech. Maybe they had the best run of it at the first 5 years.
So right now it's Clemson's time, and last year was a very big push by Clemson to remind everybody, no, you had your opportunity. We're taking back these corners, and they ended up winning the ACC again. So I think there's two separate conversations. Now everybody has to play Clemson and deal with it. And I actually agree with Mack Brown when they had lost to Clemson in the ACC championship game. What did he say? I forgot what the stat was. He's like, well, look at all the other teams that have lost to Clemson over time. He's right. It's not just an us problem.
No.
It's an everybody in the league problem losing to Clemson. So he's absolutely right with that. And I do understand the issue of playing 3 of these games in a row to end the season.
Particularly if you had asked for the Campbell game to be the penultimate game.
Totally get that. But here's where I stop. Here's where I stop with this. The first thing is, you ain't the first coach in the Triangle who's had issues in scheduling. I mean, do I want to go all the way back to Chuck Amato being all in his feelings because they had to go to Winston-Salem before they went to Ohio State?
Speaking of requests, that was the request for Phillip Rivers' senior year.
Did they get it?
We are not playing Wake Forest.
Did they get it?
Before we go to Columbus.
Did they get it? No. So Phillip Rivers went to Wake Forest, where it's always been a house of horrors. They lost that game, and obviously they go to the shoe and they lose too. But Chuck was mad. Didn't have it granted. It happens. All the coaches deal with that. And I'll close on this. What do you like to say, Joe?
If you're about that life, be about that life.
About that life. The whole point about Mack Brown coming back here was to elevate the football program, be taken seriously, and contend. And if the ACC wants to be taken seriously and wants to contend, well, this is the kind of stuff you got to deal with from time to time, all right? You got to play top-notch football games and execute and do it and not just have everything kind of work out your way. No, you create your own access to a good season by going out and beating these teams. I agree with you. In Carolina's best case scenario, they unload against Duke, get their ass handed to them at Clemson, which nobody expects them to win, and then they can come back, refocus the state. It might actually work out in your favor. Maybe. But yeah, I was very much like, this is unfair. I don't see what's unfair because I'll tell you what, that front part of that schedule, 2/3 of your schedule, hey man, you're home. So you should have a really good record, theoretically, by the time you take on Duke, again, at home.